welcome back to everybody. And I wanted to just take a moment to thank Marilyn and Elliot now for sponsoring. Just for this is the second Yortzeit of Marilyn's father. His Yortzeit was on Friday, and it is Dr. Edward Steinberg Yehuda Leib Ben Yitzhak Gedalia, a person who not only was a person who was respected for his profession, but also for his, we'll call it, communal view. And that's why so many, just having been at all the different stages and seeing all the different connections and organizations and communal vision that he had, it's a tremendous chus that we continue to learn in his memory, and his memory should be a blessing. I also want to thank the Tigers. Where are the Tigers? They were here. Oh, right over here. Who are sponsoring for Judy's sister, Necha Bas Avram Aviezer, Mrs. Nettie Marks. Unfortunately, I did not have the privilege of meeting her, but I do have the privilege of spending time with the Tigers, and that speaks volumes for the type of family. And the message should be the Ilui Nishma. So when's the actual Yortzeit? Tomorrow evening should be the Ilui Nishma side. And also the Ilui Nishmas Avram Ben Peretz, that's Jay Spector's father, Mr. Spector, whose Yortzeit is by Yom, is today. So let's start, again, just to recap what we're trying to do and achieve in this 6-week period, and then try to arrive at our destination. First of all, I have to tell you, I'm very excited about today's share. So just full disclosure, I'm very excited to be sharing and learning this particular idea. So let's start at the very beginning. We've been going through basically what we call the 6 ubiquitous virtues. These are, in positive psychology, these are the 6 basics, which are the silos of positive psychology, in which we have 24 character strengths. This is the work which is done by Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman, and what we're trying to do together is trying to sort of pick open each of these virtues, look at the strengths that are contained in them, and say, well, what does the Torah have to say or doesn't have to say? Or what's the comparison or the contrast of these values as we learn them together? So that's our goal. And we've done 2 so far. After the introduction, we did the virtue of wisdom and its 6 subcategories. We did the virtue of courage and its 4 subcategories. And now we're moving into the virtue of humanity and love, and we're back to the 60s and so we have to work out, what does humanity mean? Humanity means very different things to different people. What I used to like saying was that, it's human to make mistakes. So I used to say some people are just more human than others. But what does it mean to be human exactly? What does it mean? Again, our terminology might get a little lost here. So let's just try to define our terms before we go further. Also, just want to take the opportunity again welcoming Rabbi Chesses here, who's on his day off is coming to a shir, which is just a wonderful thing. Rabbi Chesses is the rabbi in Sharon, Massachusetts, and being mashpia in a tremendous way. So it is. If anybody's in that going in that direction, it is the community to be at in the Boston area. Let's learn. And by the way, just such a pleasure. Chesses and I go back. We were in college together and smicha together, and I'm watching him change the world and trying to hang on. So there we got it. That's right. We have Bostonians all the way through Hashem. Let's start at the beginning. So, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have the notion of the virtue of love? So there's really 3 categories. I apologize if the screen's a little bit forward for some folks. If not, there are a couple chairs around here just to make it a little easier. In humanity and love, this particular virtue deals with positive social interaction with other people. Positive social interaction is kind of a general terminology. So in this silo, there are 3 buckets. The first one is kindness or generosity. So into this is a person who has this as their signature strength. That means to say one of their top 5 strengths is a person who is kind, generous to others. You're never too busy to do a favor. You enjoy doing good deeds for others, even if you do not know them well. This means to say the way you can measure this as well, in terms of, we'll call it the actual psychological terms, is a person who has responsibility for others, even outside of their immediate sphere. That's one way of doing it. People who you can always turn to last minute. And know that they will always be there, whether it be for a cause that affects them, their family, their position, or something even beyond their scope of need and responsibility. That's the kind of person we're talking about over here. This kind of person who has this type of character strength is a person who also is somebody who is empathetic or sympathetic, right? Being a person who has the ability to be able to hear, suffer with, even if not necessarily being able to do something. And so it's so important. I think most people today need time more than they necessarily need solutions. Right? So many people are looking for solution creating, where a lot of times people just need hearing. That's part of the kindness which is being offered as part of this character strength, kindness or generosity. This sounds very Jewish, folks, right? This is definitely very much a Jewish value, strength. We're going to try to see how the contrasts arrive when it comes to this. When it comes to this next section, this one's called the capacity to love and be loved. It's a very interesting idea. So the capacity to love we get, right? Meaning it's kindness and generosity goes up to a certain point, and love is a different sphere, or a different level of giving, right? But it's interesting that it's put together with the capacity to be loved. You value close relations with others, in particular those in which sharing and caring are reciprocated. The people to whom you feel most close are the same people who feel most close to you. These are kind of people who have, deeply romantic marriages, people who care about relationships deeply, family matters a tremendous amount. It is interesting to note in research, this is just a fascinating point, that cultures that have arranged marriages, let's say non-Western cultures that have arranged marriages, have a higher incidence of romantic relationships and marriages than in the Western society. People choose their marriages. That's just an interesting thing to think about, and what that actually means and how that plays itself out. Food for thought. In this section, just interesting. There was a longitudinal research which is still being done by a gentleman called George Vaillant. Anybody familiar? Sound familiar? He did a study, continued study, from the classes in Harvard, 1937 to 42, I believe.
Yeah, it's still going
And
on.
what was that?
75 years.
Right, a 75-year research. And basically he tracked these people, a class of 250 or so, and he tracked them through their lives with intervals of interviews and tracking all the way through their lives. And he found, certain parameters of what creates happiness, what doesn't create happiness, and so on. And he tells a story in one of his research. He labels a case number, so case number 47. So in this particular case, he talked about a particular physician who was a very successful man, and he led a very successful career, ended on his own terms, and around his 70th birthday, his wife, knowing that he's coming towards retirement now, reached out secretly to a lot of his long-time patients and said, so-and-so is, my husband is retiring, would you care to write in your feelings, the relationship you've had over the years? And they wrote in the most beautiful notes, and he came to Dr. Vaillant and had this beautiful box which his wife had wrapped for him with all these notes as a birthday present. And this was now, at this point in time, it was 8 years after his retirement. And he started crying and said, George, I haven't been able to read that. An interesting thing. I haven't been able to read those letters. And what Dr. Seligman points out is that ultimately it's interesting, for men especially, it's very hard to have the second half of the statement, to be loved, to allow oneself to be loved. Because positive emotion isn't insulating. Negative emotion insulates you. It sets you aside and alone. Positive emotion makes you vulnerable. It's very hard to be vulnerable. It's very hard to allow oneself to be loved. I remember I have one sister, and she's a very, very powerful person. And I remember one time she gave me a compliment, and I've always been self-deprecating, and at a certain point she said to me, listen to me, I just gave you a compliment, say thank you. Right, I mean, say, forget all the niceties and so on. When somebody says something nice to you, allow yourself to be loved. Allow yourself to be worthy of, right, this is part of what this strength is. It's a two-way street. And I want to just take a moment before we go any further. Actually, we'll come back to this. We're going to have Desla's take on this in a moment. And finally, the last one. By the way, we did this one. There's a machlokas hapoiskim between the psychologists if this strength belongs in wisdom or in humanity and love. We already did sort of cover it. You can see how it fits into both. This is really EQ, emotional intelligence. You're aware of motives, people's and feelings of others, and you can respond to them well. So you adjust yourself. You walk into the room. There's certain people who really walk into a room and they sense the temperature, they sense the colors of the room, and they understand what's going on socially between people without necessarily even speaking to them. This belongs in social intelligence. You can see how it sort of lives in both humanity and wisdom a little bit in terms of the research. These people are self-aware of their career. You know, sort of the example that Dr. Seligman gives as one example is, you know, what Daniel Goleman calls his book Emotional Intelligence. EQ is based on this. But also, like, you know, Michael Jordan, who, you know, moved from one sport to another, where he really succeeded in basketball when he was an average baseball player, and later on he's kind of moved out into golf, so that didn't really work out. But nonetheless, the ability to know oneself and know where one's successful. Okay, so these are the three signature, or the three strengths. And I'm sure that we resonate with some of these, don't resonate with some of these as well. What I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time thinking about the Torah perspective on these. And is love a Torah value? And the answer is yes. Absolutely, of course. This is the easiest of all the values to really describe, because the Torah describes love in a number of places. Where do we hear it? So it's interesting. We have. So let's turn from descriptive ideas. We need to say there's a lot of times the Tanakh tells us about people who love one another. Let's talk about where the Torah tells us to love. So it's interesting. There's two dimensions to that. There's what we said in Va'es Chanan is Va'atas Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem. But then there's we'll call it the tag pasuk to that, which is Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? That we should love one another. One should love one's friend like oneself, which seems to be a very high standard, right? I mean, it's very hard to get to that point. You have to try to work out what the Torah really means when it says Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But needless to say, that not only is this a particular one of the 613 mitzvahs, Rabbi Akiva actually said that in the Medrash quoted about this, Amar Rabbi Akiva says, "Zeh klal gadol b'Torah." This is the. If you want to know it, this is it. You want to understand what the Torah is all about. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your friend like yourself. This is the golden rule of Judaism. In fact, none of the Mepharshim say that lots of other mitzvahs actually fall into this umbrella category. So when it comes to lots of other mitzvahs, ben adam l'chaver, when it comes to how we deal with one another, you really actually fall under this rubric of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. This is the klal, and into the klal we fit all the details. Get this right, get this tone of life right, everything else fits into place. So this is very much, and this relates, you can see it relates to the Gemilas Chasadim, the kindness track, and also the love and be loved track. They're sort of merging, so to speak, in this. I mean, we have to see how those two differ from one another in a moment. One thing I just always found curious is the beginning of the pasuk. Nobody really puts that in context. But the beginning of the pasuk, Lo Sikom v'lo Sitar. What's the Torah telling us? Don't take revenge.
Emotional attitude and apply it positively.
Okay, so there's a negative attitude, so the Torah is saying apply positive. It's just fascinating to me because, you know, you think this is so important, it should really get its own, like, you know, so, you know, there should be a period right there after Lo Sikom v'lo Sitar, and it should be, you know, in bold, underlined, there's an NB in the column, right? So this is it. This is love. This is the most important thing. And so, but we sort of throw in over there, don't, you know, and by the way, don't, you know, withhold you letting him use your lawnmower. Yes.
Maybe it's kind of taking it down to a more practical and realistic level. That the bar of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is defined as Lo Sikom v'lo Sitar as b'nei amecha. It's like,
oh man, well, that makes it much easier for us.
It makes it exactly, because otherwise, as you said, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha may be an impossible standard to meet, but you're going to manifest it at a practical level.
Very interesting. Although I would hope that's true, and if that would be it, we're doing great. You know,
you gotta start somewhere.
But I would feel very well. I'm very remiss if the standard of Judaism of love is not creating injury.
I would
I don't know. I think I'd be happy with that.
You would turn the pasuk around. You would say V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha Lo Sikom v'lo Sitar. That would put the limit. By saying Lo Sikom v'lo Sitar and then saying the principle, you're just saying here's a classic example of what commonly occurs. But remember, there's V'ahavta, and you have to override.
Compared to emulating Hashem, when Hashem gives us His loving kindness and has a lot of, chesed for us, even though we haven't necessarily deserved it. So maybe that's the same idea. Your neighbor might not deserve it. Yeah, your neighbor might not deserve it, but you still have an obligation
beautiful.
to love them.
I love that. As well, these ideas are such beautiful ideas. Right. So putting things in context as well. Is that, you know, when we come to Hashem, we don't really always exactly deserve what He wants or deserve to get. He forgets that. and he allows us beautiful. That takes out for relationships as well.
To reinforce Mary's point, that phrase, the fact that it's positioned prior, things are really preemptive behavioral prefixes which allow us to then reach it at a higher level.
Beautiful. So I mean, that's the necessary sort of stepping stone even.
Yeah, now we can reach the higher level. I think that's-
So I want to actually explore one idea which relates to this, and this sort of differentiates Judaism potentially from other systems of thought in this regard. And this is the works of Shadal, Rav Shlomo David Luria. Rosato, I'm sorry, I was getting mixed up. He has a very interesting Pirush on the Torah, which is actually they have it actually online free. You can find his Pirush online. It's beautiful, beautiful Pirush. He says a very interesting insight. Such a very, very powerful insight into life and the way the Torah expects love of us. So he notice he makes an interesting observation here. He says, Vashivui. He says, let's start over here. Vaharamban Piresh. The Torah is expecting us to love one's colleague as in all the ways that we love ourselves. It is in terms of quality as opposed to quantity of love. What does he mean? He says, in a way that there is no tension between the two parties. What does that mean? Because when you have two entities in a relationship, and everybody carves out their own space, and they have their own expectations, and we'll call it, their bubble, then that becomes sounding like Midas Sodom, where it's sheli, sheli, v'shelcha, shelcha. Ki eich eitiv l'chaveirai, b'li sheyevo'ani lihefsed or torach kal or kaved. How is it possible for me to create a relationship without me, so to speak, negating self, whether it be in time, energy, biting my lip, in finances, without investing in that relationship? Isn't that interesting? Every real relationship requires some form of sacrifice. Isn't that interesting? Ki ba'hechrech yesh tamid hisnagdus bein hana'asi v'ha'anas zulasi. Always there's a tension between my benefit in the relationship and your benefit in the relationship. And for me to facilitate your enjoyment in this relationship, I sometimes have to, not sometimes, I always have to curtail mine. I can't, there simply is a finite amount of matter, a finite amount of finances and energy. And if I'm giving it, I'm sacrificing it. Which means that the Torah is telling us an interesting thing. Because what is lo sikom v'lo sitom really actually doing? If you think about this, not taking revenge. Revenge is something which, or bearing a grudge, is something which is eminently logical. It's unlike, let's say being angry or putting a stumbling block in front of the blood, which are just bad things, right? Just don't do those kind of things. And the Torah said that previously in the previous psukim. When it comes to taking revenge, we're justified. After all, he did drive over my flower bed, right? In the end of the day, he did, kick my dog. So therefore, it's going to now be, she deserves what I'm about to do to them. But when you're in we'll call the quid pro quo framework of what is just and what is deserving, there's no space for relationship. Because relationships cannot exist where we're simply doing what we get and what they get. It has to require overlap and therefore sacrifice. That's the way that the Rav Letzato is saying. That's a fascinating point. Meaning to say, the attitude of revenge is the attitude which prevents relationships from flourishing. That's the way he looks at it. That's just a very important way of looking at it, which means that anytime we enter into a relationship with the expectation of retaining everything we have and sort of building on that and getting more, then ultimately we're losing it. John Gray's famous book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? So he used to have a subtitle, they changed this. You should take a look at the old versions. This is why we have Google Images, because you can't get rid of that, right? So it used to be getting what you want out of your relationship. I beg your pardon? That's the way you're going to that. What I want from my relationship, and you're going to... No, that's a very self-centered kind of way of looking at relationships, isn't it? But that's what the Rav Letzato is saying, is that relationships don't work like that. Because that's just the point number one, which I think is a very, very incisive point in understanding the context of love that the Torah is describing. But there's another part, and this part I think makes us feel a little less comfortable, and that is the universality of it. You see, in today's day and age, when you find Judaism that is devoid of Torah Judaism, which there's much of, right? So, streams of Judaism which have long ago, forgotten about certain parts, not all necessarily, but certain parts of it. Or loving and supporting society has become almost like the T-shirt slogan. # love your friend. This is Judaism is all about this. So I'd like to ask is how universal is it? Well, the Torah actually puts in a disclaimer into this, as the Orach Chaim HaKadosh points out, and he says, notice that it says v'diktek lomar achicha amcha. What does it say? V'afta l'rei acha. Right? It says your friends, which is an interesting point. That's actually a limiting clause. What does that mean? He says lomar she'ein mitzvah ela al anashim she'osim maaseh amcha. The mitzvah is only for people who are doing the maaseh amcha, the acts of your nation. Right, who are with you ideologically. Aval sonei Hashem, kagon hamumri v'apikorsim, those who are heretic to the belief system, right, asur le'avasam. You're not allowed to love them. V'adarabba tzarich l'sanasam. In certain instances, one detests not them, but what they represent. That's a very disquieting idea over here, to think about this for a moment. That means to say that Judaism isn't about, kumbaya, we're all around the bonfire together, and we're all, right, everything's just, happy go. No. There's certain limitations. Now that doesn't mean to say there's certain other things, there's Darkei Shalom, there's other mitzvahs which apply itself to other categories of people. But just to appreciate that this isn't necessarily universal. There is that disclaimer. I think that requires thinking, which means to say that loving Judaism isn't necessarily a value, we'll call it an axiomatic value, it is an ideological value. Think about that. Meaning it's based on an ideology that it was given with. Meaning Hashem is telling you, love because I told you to love. And therefore, when I tell you not to, there's also a limitation. That's a very, very thought-provoking question as to, is this a natural flow of ourselves that we're channeling, or is this because Hashem told us? This is something we have to think about deeply over here. And this is going to be different, potentially, than the universal strength of love. Now, being a nice person, greeting people wonderfully, and being a good person in society is all wonderful. Might not be part of this. That's just to differentiate.
So, Rabbi,
yeah.
it's the actions that you have to despise, right? Not the people themselves. It's their actions that we despise.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're not, yes, 100%.
Right, so
The Gemara says in Brachos about Rabbi Meir that Rabbi Meir had a lot of trouble. He lived at a time where people were persecuting. It wasn't that they were name calling; they were reporting him to the authorities. And so he would daven that they should perish.
Right.
And his wife said to him, Bruria said to Rabbi Meir, she said, don't die. It says Yitama doesn't say Yitama choitim in aretz, Yitama chatoim in aretz. That really we should be worried that sins disappear, not sinners. So there's and so he shifted his priorities in terms of that. To Mr. Price.
Who is included in the word Re'acha?
So it seems very general here, but it sounds like Re'acha b'mitzvahs, which means to say that people who are on the same page in terms of, we'll call it Torah traditional Judaism. That's what it sounds like.
So according to that, you can't take anyone who's not included in that. You can't take revenge.
No. This is not a disclaimer on revenge. This is not a disclaimer on revenge. This is a disclaimer on love. I don't remember the parameters for that seems to be a broader category. You're right. That's there's two separate clauses over there. We should do that. I don't remember because we need to actually do research in the first half, which is completely separate pasuk itself. But nonetheless, this now leads us into a very interesting topic, which is, if really love, or the commandment to love, is ideologically based, it's based on what Hashem is telling us, and it was the parameters of what Hashem is telling us, so how far does that go? So let's try to push this. Now this is an idea that we have learned to before in different settings, but it's so powerful, and every time I learn it, I just get so, it's like the first time. So I apologize if we've learned this before, but this is just so powerful. This is one of the most powerful ideas that I've ever come across. So here we go. The Torah, this is the story that we're all very familiar with. The Gemara in Shabbos. Famous story is about Hillel and Shammai. So the Gemara relates the following story. There was a story about a particular Gentile. So he says, here's the deal. I'm going to stand on one foot, and in the amount of time that you can tell me the whole Torah on one foot, and then I will convert. So Shammai's response, he didn't even give him a response in words. He says, "Da'achlo ba'amas abinin." He took his building stick and he chased him off the property. Right, that was that. There's no, we don't play games with Judaism. So he says, "Ba'alifnei Hillel," but he came in front of Hillel, Gaire, and Hillel accepted his request to become Jewish. Amalai da'alach sani lachavarch lo yisabed. That which is hateful to yourself, don't do to your friends. This is all the Torah. The rest is just are just footnotes. It's just an explanation. Go learn the rest of it, and you're in. Fantastic. Which, by the way, almost is the reciprocal of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, isn't it? Right? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is love your friend as yourself. The reciprocal of that is what you don't know. If you're supposed to love your friend as yourself, then of course anything you wouldn't want to happen to yourself, you wouldn't do to your friends. Almost like the reverse is that if you turn that same statement around, if you look at the empty space, that's essentially what Hillel is saying. Right? So which matches, it sounds very similar. We have to differentiate in a moment between his statement and Rabbi Akiva's point. Right? Rabbi Akiva says, Zek klal gadol b'Torah, it's a very important rule. And so therefore Hillel seems to be saying, well, that's important enough to be the sufficient grounds for Gerus. The issue really is like this, is that, like, let's say I was the prospective convert here, and I really wanted in on Judaism, and this rabbi told me that all of Judaism is about love and not hurting other people, right? So I'm like, that is amazing. That is so up my alley. That is exactly what I want. And then 7 days later, they said, well, it's sunset coming. And I'm like, sun what? What do you mean? The weekend starts, after work, doesn't it? Right? And they said, no, there's this thing called Sabbath. I'm like, Sabbath? I see. So tell me a little more about that one. No, right? And then what happens is, then it comes to a year like this, and then it's like Monday, Tuesday, it's like, there's Rosh Hashanah. The next Monday, Tuesday, then there's Yom Kippur, it's a fast day, and then there's another Monday, Tuesday, and it's another Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And then they say, well, when you go to Israel, there's this thing called Shemitah. I'm like, what's this got to do with love? I don't get it. Did I sign up for the wrong religion over here? Meaning, like, Hillel is not telling us the right thing. He's pulling the wool over this fellow's eyes. That's not fair, right? I understand that loving one's fellow certainly encompasses a great amount of Judaism. In fact, it may even encompass half of Judaism if we wanted to be poetically, sort of liberal about, how much Judaism talks about Ben Adam Lachavera when it comes to, we'll call the lateral plane of Judaism. But that's excluding the vertical plane, right? There's so much God relationship over here that's got nothing to do with the way we treat each other. Right? I don't get it, right? It's just shatnez. It's got nothing to do with my friend. It really hasn't. But I signed up for that. So Hillel's being wantonly irresponsible by telling this poor fellow about this, right? So like he should have just said, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and there's the other part, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. At least say the other part of it so that the person's not fooled by this, right? You see this? It's a little bit of an issue, right? Now, of course, Hillel's trying to be accommodating, but this is more hurtful than accommodating ultimately. So how is Hillel's rule actually addressing this? Yes.
But that goes to the point that it goes to the love is the ideology and not the ideology of Judaism, not.
Okay, yes. Meaning the love must be based on an ideology, not just whatever it is. So here, I want us to do for a moment just a quick look at the way Rashi looks at this. And this is important because a lot of times when we learn Rashi on the Chumash or on the Gemara, we learn Rashi and Rashi says, oh, that's sort of the proto-art scroll. No, Rashi's not simply just translating. Rashi's actually addressing questions. So for instance, in this case, look what Rashi does. Rashi says, Da'alach sani lachaverech lo yisabed. When Rashi explains this Gemara, he says the following: Re'acha v're'a avicha al ta'azov. He quotes the pasuk in Mishlei, which says, "Your friend and the friend of your father that don't leave." Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is God. So what is Hillel really saying? There's two parts, there's two dimensions of friend. There's friends with a lowercase f, and there's friends with a capital F, right? So V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha means all of them, upwards and sideways. Love them all. That's what Rashi is essentially addressing, because he's addressing the fact that Hillel has left out half of the Torah, right? Al tavor al devoro, sharei olecha sonoi sheyavor chavrecha al dvorecha. Okay, good. That's Rashi's first explanation. Lashon acher. Is Rashi still addressing the question? Chaver chamanish. No, it means friends with a lowercase f. Your friends. Kagon, kazela, ganeva, niyov. Means to say like theft, when it comes to, robbery, theft, adultery, that's what it's talking about. These are all ben adam lachaver, these are all intrahuman. So it says v'roiv mitzvahs, and most of the mitzvahs, which means, what's he saying?
Most of them.
Most of the deal, it wasn't the whole thing, he wasn't pretending. So what's the question that Rashi's struggling with is that he's only giving him a partial package. So either we have to expand what Re'acha means, or it is most of the Torah, technically speaking, and he'll work out Shabbos when he gets there. So this is what Rashi suggests. I think we need to do a little bit more of a depth research as to understanding this. Sometimes we read Gemaras and we read these stories and we say, that's a very nice sounding story. We fail to appreciate that every detail of the story actually is very, very much is descriptive and metaphoric of a certain thought process. So here's an example. Let's take a look at this for a second. The Mishnah in Perkei Avos tells us a very important rule. This is the second Mishnah in Perkei Avos, so pretty much central, the beginning central ideas. Shimon HaTzadik, like Mishra Knesset Agdala. Shimon HaTzadik said it was from the remains of the Anshe Knesset Agdala. He was the last card-carrying member. His statement in life was, Al Shlosh Dvarim Ha'olam Omed. The world stands on three things: Al Torah, Al Avoda, Al Gvuras Chasadim. The world is a tripod. It stands on three central ideas. And these ideas, by the way, are different to each other if we were to paint them as vectors. So like with direction, so then the direction of Torah is what the way the Maharal understands on this Mishnah is inwards. It's self-rectification. Avoda is tefillah or korbanos, which is upwards. That's our relationship with Hashem. And Gvuras Chasadim is outwards. So it's sort of inwards, upwards, outwards. If we're thinking about these three dimensions, and that's really all the three dimensions of relationships that we have. We have a relationship with ourselves, with people around us, and with Hashem. Right? So that's what the Mishnah is essentially saying: is everything is dependent on these three parts of our service of God, and all mitzvahs fall into these categories, and there's obviously overlap. What was the ger? What was this potential convert actually asking? So Rav Meir Twersky was a teacher of mine in Yeshiva University. He says such a brilliant insight. What was he saying? He says, I want you to teach me all the Torah on one leg. He wasn't talking about his leg. He was talking about the foundational leg of the Torah. He says the following: Hillel or Shammai, can you tell me? I know that the Torah stands on three legs, right? There's three things the world stands on. But is there one which is more central than the rest? If you were to take away the other two, would Torah Judaism still stand? This is what the fellow was asking. What did Shammai do? What was his response? He chased him away with, what was he chasing away with? Amas Avinyam, which is a building stick. What he said is, your question is architecturally unsound. There is no way. This is a tripod, and it needs all three legs. It needs the relationship laterally, vertically, and inwardly. There is no way to sort of negate or overlook one aspect of Judaism. So don't do that. Don't even question that. Judaism can't stand like that. That's what Shammai was doing metaphorically by chasing him away. What is Hillel's answer now, according to this? So what Hillel's answer is that the central leg is Gvuras Chasadim, which means outwards. That's a fascinating interpretation, which is brilliant because isn't that what the pasuk itself says? Ani Hashem. I am God when you love your friends like yourself. Which means that the Torah itself, and what Hillel seems to be doing in following that, is that the most important part of the Torah seems to be the way we treat each other. So that's what Hillel's essentially saying. If you were to put it onto one leg, but then the question we have to ask ourselves is, why? How is that true? Why does this eclipse, or how does it rather incorporate or include the rest of the Torah? That's the question that we have to really deal with.
Also to reconcile it with the Gemara Marcus,
Right.
you see, I don't know if
So how does that incorporate this?
Right.
Which seems to be more godly.
But it would fit with many of the words of the Nevi'im,
Yes.
where the complaint against
The way they treat each other.
was much more about how they treat
Right.
each other rather than about Avoda. Right.
When you read what they say, it sounds like they're talking about a society which is falling apart rather than necessarily the relationship with Hashem.
But if
So
you
how
look-
does it work?
If you
Yeah.
look at this as a stepping stone, he's a convert. He has to start somewhere.
No, you're right. You're right. This is certainly, and I think on a simple read of the Gemara, that's the way it is. And that's what Rashi was saying. Rav Mitzvah at the beginning. I think there's more
That's the
to
way
it.
Parshas Kedoshim works.
Right.
No,
A bit of the, and this is where it is.
That's the way it goes.
That's where the pasuk
Right,
is.
right.
You're right. Now, I like to dig a little deeper. So there's two ideas in thought I'd like to spend just a few moments looking at, and then maybe we'll move on to one other idea. This first idea is to be found in the Tanya. This is Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi in the 32nd chapter of Likutei Amorim. Likutei Amorim is sort of the main central part of Tanya, and for anybody who learns Tanya, this is what in Chabad Chassid is called the Lev HaTanya. This is the heart of the Tanya. Is the 32nd chapter, and of course it talks about love. And he has a very profound Kabbalistic thought which he shares over here. This is just a very, very, very deep concept that he espouses. He says the following: "V'hinei al yedei kiyum ha'devarim aniru le'el, li'os gufo nivzeh v'nimas be'einav, rak simchaso tiyeh simchas ha'nefesh levadai, harezu derech yashar v'kal lo v'al yedei kiyum mitzvasat l'erecha kamoicha." To the degree that we focus less on our, we'll call it a body awareness in this world, to the degree we narrow that down, we spend less time focusing on that, is the degree we're able to love each other as oneself. The more we focus, when we say I, who am I? Am I the body that I manifest in? Am I the house that represents me, the cars that I drive, the season tickets? But how do I define myself? How big is the sphere of the I? And what he's saying is if you're able to contract that sense of I, and the I becomes really my spiritual persona, and the body is an accompanying instrument with that, to the degree that that's my I, it's easier to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of after l'recha kamoicha. And he says, since the body is not significant, in fact is disgusting here, that's how far he goes, 2:1. Meaning to say, I'm feeling that I need to eat chocolate cake today, and you say, well, why does my body need this right now? Meaning, why is my primate body acting in a way that is going to be taking me in a direction which are going to hurt me in the end of the day? If that's the sort of, am I able to differentiate as opposed to sort of indulging and feeling like it's me talking? And realizing that really one's self is sourced in a much higher, loftier world. Really, in the sort of spiritual picture of things, we are already sourced in one spiritual entity. But we differentiate as we transcend downwards into this world, into separate bodies. Sort of speak in a very rough image, if you can imagine sort of like dough being pushed through a colander. And like you have one piece of dough which is being pushed through and it comes into threads. So we differentiate when we enter this world. Which means to say that if we're able to focus beyond or above, then we realize that we actually aren't so different. We're actually mishoresh echad. We come from one source, where we're one entity. And in that entity, there's no fighting. Meaning it's only in our distinct realities that there's fighting. And it's my property, and it's my business, and it's my neighbor, and all the different things that come from differentiation, or where machlokas, or where disagreement comes in. So the degree we're able to de-emphasize separation is the degree that we're able to remember connection. That's his way of doing it. And then he says then he goes back to exactly our story. That's why Hillel says that the whole Torah is after Recha Kamocha, ki yesod v'shoresh kol haTorah hu la'agbia u'la'alois ha'nefesh al haguf mala ad ikra v'shoresha. The way to really get to true love of one's friend isn't just because, put a smile on our faces and we drop off coffee out of people's houses. That's not because you're making choices, it's because of focus of life. A life which is focused more on the spiritual, more on our central connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and each other on a spiritual plane, will obviously leave us with a type of life led which is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's a very powerful idea, and he says that's why it is. We say, Barucheinu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad. Hashem, please bless us when we're Kulanu Ke'echad. We can only get there if we're all one entity. This takes a lot of work, an incredible amount of work to de-emphasize, we'll call it, body awareness or this world awareness, because this world so emphasizes this, and it so emphasizes, graphing success versus others, and right, it's a competitive world we live in. So what he's saying is that if we're to really actualize our spiritual persona, which is bein adam lemakom, which is relationship with Hashem, then the other one falls into place. That's what Hillel was ultimately saying. Very powerful, very spiritual idea, a lofty idea. This is a very hard idea. This is a lifetime and a few worth of work to be able to get there.
How does this relate to the concept of Gashmius versus Ruchnius,
Well, that's what he's saying, is that
essentially?
what he's saying is that the more that we focus ourselves
On
in
Gashmias.
success being a certain level of Gashmias, whatever that means in whichever society that we're in, to the degree that we focus that, the more competitive we become and the more differentiated we remain. The less we care about that, the more we have in common with one another, because that's not a differentiating factor as to my net worth or to my net expectations. That's the way he's focusing. It's very hard to attain this, especially in Western society, but this should be a goal of in life, and that's what Hillel was ultimately saying. There are more practical, yes, sorry.
And just apropos of that, I don't remember where it was exactly who said it, but that's the pasuk, if you want to interpret, Meshiv Haruach Morid Hadashem.
Oh yes,
Which I walked
I love
away.
that.
Meshiv Haruach, you want to bring back.
Bring back the Ruach,
Moshe.
more Geshem, and yeah, and to sort of appreciate the Geshem, which is the Gashmas. Listen, it's easy to talk about. This is the kind of thing where I think these are incremental successes in our lives. This takes a huge amount of work, and success is made in incremental decisions. These are not turnarounds which are they're very, very hard to attain, but nonetheless important. I want to just, if it's all right, I want to just move a little bit because I want to. There's a few ideas I want to address. The other idea is this. This is one of the most profound thoughts I come across. This is the Mishnah Chochmah of Meir Simcha Dubinsk. Just an unbelievable insight into Me'avav L'Ra'at Kamocha. He points out the following. His idea, we're not going to read inside just for a moment, but it's worthwhile taking a look when you have a chance. It's a very long essay. His basic assumption is that God is found in harmony, in ecosystems, which means to say when you look at the world, it goes on to describe the flora, fauna, human world. When you see things working together, that's where godliness is to be found. You see the seasons and how they interact and how everything works. I remember one example that just is like, there was one year there was an early snow, and many trees collapsed. Why? October snow. Why did trees collapse? The leaves, right? So there's a certain way that things work. The leaves are usually off by the time it snows, so that the trees don't collapse. This is a basic example. The precise nature of how the gravity of the size and therefore the gravity of the Earth apropos the Sun, and therefore that we're at just the right distance from the sun, that the seasons are manageable and we can adapt to those seasons. Like there's so much precision, there's so much of an ecosystem. There's so many examples that we can talk about in the world. I'm trying to see if this again I always come back to this such a strange example. But if you take a look at the old series of BBC Planet Earth, because they've come out with a new one recently, which is also very worth it. But in the Jungles episode, they talk about there's a particular fungus which grows out of plants, and when the plants are being overeaten, it releases fungal spores which which target particular insects. Let's say it's ants, and the ant, once affected by this fungus, starts walking around as if it's drunk, like sort of can't walk straight, and then climbs up a stem of a tree and puts its pincers on the tree and dies there, and then the fungus grows out of the back of its head and spreads more spores to the rest of the colony. So the colony knows the ant is being infected and sort of tries to isolate it, quarantine it, so that they know that it's being infected. It's the way the plants fight back against overeating. So different plant systems have different fungi that they use against different systems of insects to maintain balance. I mean, it's remarkable. Do you know, like when they introduced non-indigenous, alien, animal life into different countries, they find that the animals start dying because the plant life is only able to, the fauna can only survive with the particular plant life in that area. There's so much of just cohesion in ecosystems, and usually, whenever we enter it and we interrupt it, we usually mess it up. That's generally the rule. Once we try to do something, we usually mess up that system. And then 20 years down the line, we're like, oh, we're the bees. No, that's usually what happens afterwards. And we realize that we actually messed up something, whether it be in the body, and we introduce new drugs, or whether it be in the ecosystem around us, and we introduce new pipelines, whatever else it is that we've done. And then we realize afterwards, oh yes, that's why that happened. There was a particular society in Africa where they introduced a particular pesticide so that they could have rice which would last longer and they could feed the people. There'd be more food on the plate. And they did that, and then the next season all their huts fell down because they realized the pesticide had killed a particular insect which was eating the termites which were eating the huts. And when they killed the bug which was eating the termites, and then the termites ate the huts, and the huts fell down. So we just don't realize. We don't realize how much of an ecosystem God has in the precision and working together. So therefore, says the Mishnah Chochmah, That works the same way in the human kingdom. And that is V'atarach Kamocha. Folks, if we're able to work together, that's the greatest exemplification or the greatest expression of Ani Hashem. That's the end of the pasuk. Anya, meaning says Hillel, you want to get it right? If you work together, that is the greatest sign of godliness. When you see humans who act absolutely altruistically, who create non-profit organizations to go save people they've never met in the world, just for the sake of doing it, not because of fame, not because of glory, not because of the TED Talk, and not because of the YouTube channel, then ultimately you feel this sense of, wow, I'm so glad, I'm so refreshed that these are human beings who can do this instead of killing each other and chopping off their heads on TV, right? That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. Get this right, Ani Hashem. That's where I'm to be found. So what Hillel is ultimately saying is yes, it is the Klal Gadol of Torah because you're manifesting me by doing this. That's another interpretation of this. But I want to just, in closing, I want to just close with one last point, which is I think sometimes psychology doesn't necessarily appreciate to the same degree that Torah does. Because let's come back to this for a second. We've seen two people who described this rule in general. One of them was Rabbi Akiva, and one of them was Hillel. Rabbi Akiva quoted the exact pasuk saying, "V'atarecha kamocha zeh klal gadol b'Torah." This is a great rule in Torah. And then we saw Hillel, who almost summarized it, in Aramaic, in the reverse side, which is "Mada alach sanei lechavrach lo yisavik," which you hate, which is hateful to you, don't do to your two one's friend. Right? That's what Hillel did. Up to pretty recently, I conflated the two, meaning to say, Hillel's really saying "V'atarecha kamocha," but he isn't exactly. So let's try to sort of separate the two ideas for just a brief moment to appreciate what Hillel's really saying, because Hillel's actually moving in a different direction to Rebbe Akiva. And more than that, here's why the problem exists. You see, Rebbe Akiva had this great statement in life, and that was "V'atarecha kamocha." We learned about this a few years ago. There's a little bit of an issue. There's a bit of a life issue with Rebbe Akiva. We discussed this actually a little while back in Parshas Emor at Shalosh Sudas. But let's think about this. Rebbe Akiva was the one who had 24,000 students who died. And the Gemara attributes their death to Shalom Nagel Kovad Zevazeh. They didn't respect one another. Wait a second. On the entrance to the base Midrash, carved in marble, Rebbe Akiva said, "Zeh klal gadol b'Torah v'Torah kamocha." Were they blind? Did they not see that sign when they walked in every day? Wasn't that sort of like the yeshiva slogan around the logo? I mean, they missed that memo. How could it be that Rebbe Akiva's entire life work was the thing that they missed out? Okay, let's say they weren't good at cleaning their rooms. Okay, that wasn't part of V'atarech Kamocha. That's a separate issue. But V'atarech Kamocha, Shelo Nagel Kovad Zevazeh, it's almost as if was his entire policy a failure? Chas v'shalom. How could it be that you have a teacher who says that and the students who don't do that? It's the same thing. Very, very, very troubling problem. Very troubling. I mean, this is the Rebbe Akiva's entire life work. So some Mepharshim actually suggest that Rebbe Akiva's Zeh Klal Gadol Torah was as a response to this. Meaning some people say that this was what Rebbe Akiva adopted in the realization that it had not worked out. That his students did not have it, and therefore that was his response. That's such a powerful idea to think about. That are we able to change our life perspective and change actually our direction in life sufficiently after disaster to really learn from it, or do we carry on blaming? Right, that's a very, very,
It's hard
very.
to prove the sequence, though.
It is hard to prove the sequence. No, 100%. So that's why there's no way of doing it. Yes, there's no necessarily proof for that, but it is a very fascinating, intriguing idea. The idea I'd like to explore is the following. This is an idea actually which is said by the Shem Mishmuel, the Shosaka Chabad Rebbe, which is a very powerful idea. This is the Gemara about, of course, his students, the students in Yevamos, some of Beis and Beis, about all of them dying together. Shelo Nagel Kovad Zevazeh. So here's the reason why we're mistaken in our question. Because if you continue in the same daf in Yevamos, on daf Samach Beis and Beis, the Gemara just talks about marriage. The Gemara says the following. Tana Rabbanon, ha'oyeves ishtoi kagufo, v'amachabda yosem megufo. It's talking about great things that people should be doing, and it says a person should love one's wife, and of course this goes in both directions. One should love one's spouse like oneself, but umachabda, and honor her or honor them, yoser migufo, more than oneself. Which means that we're talking about two separate verbs. And what are those verbs? One verb is love, and the other verb is respect and honor. Those are different ideas. Do you notice that Rebbe Akiva's students died because of a lack of honor and respect? They didn't die because of a lack of love. Let's think about that for a moment, what that actually means. This is such a profound idea. Love, and this is where the way that the Soccer Chopper Rebbe suggests, love is the values and ideas that we share in common. I love somebody because we harmonize, there's so much we see, we look in the same direction. It's not eye to eye, it's side by side, and we have so much that we share in common, and we share the way we spend our time off and what we want to achieve in life, and I love you because of that. And look what we all have together. But where respect comes in? Respect comes in the parts that we don't necessarily see eye to eye, where we don't necessarily agree upon. So, like now, when it comes to any marriage or any friendship, there obviously are parts where there's similarity and there are parts where there's dissimilarity. Love is focusing on the similarity. But if all you have is love, then when it comes to the parts which aren't exactly the way you jive or live life, then it's very hard. You want to almost conform those parts to your way of life, because you want it to all be love, you want it to all be similar, you want it to all be in the same direction. And if both people are doing that, then ultimately there's discord. Respect is in the parts of dissimilarity. Respecting difference is the basis of the relationship, essentially. If in the other way you had a relationship which is only respect, so I only respect the differences, but there's no love, there's also lacking, but it's more foundational of a relationship, or more long-lived than a relationship only with love and lacking respect. Thinking about that. So if you think about this for a moment, Rebbe Akiva has professed all day long, love, 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 but what was missing in the relationship with his students was respect. And when you're always trying to make everybody do the same thing as you because you're loving them and you have so much in common and we want to have even much more in common, then it falls apart. And it did fall apart. What is Hillel saying? Think about this for a second. It's exactly the opposite. That's exactly what Hillel was saying. Hillel was saying, getting to love is the second step of the game. The first step is don't hurt. Don't hurt is a form of respect. That's the first step. Exactly, not taking revenge. Brilliant! What an unbelievable insight. I searched through the 24 character strengths. The word respect doesn't appear in any of the titles or any of the descriptions. Is that fascinating? It's all about love. But you know what? Sometimes love is not appropriate. I was at a teacher's retreat because I teach in a high school. We're talking about loving all our students. It's important to love all your students. And I interjected and I said, I'm sorry. It's not important that we love all our students. It's important that we respect all our students. But you don't have to love all your students. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody appreciates things and looks about the same way. But we certainly have to respect each other. Respect is the basic step, and that's what Hillel was saying was the basis of all the Torah. I think it's so important to differentiate, because sometimes it's unfair to expect love, when necessarily the first step is respect. So just to recap what we covered today, just some of the profound concepts. These are some of the most beautiful, beautiful ideas, the difference between respect and love. We talked about the three character strengths within the idea over here in terms of kindness, the capacity to love and be loved. We didn't get to the Rav Dessler yet necessarily. We'll come back to that in Mr. Shon another time. And social intelligence. We talked about the parameters of how universal it is, and also why revenge is necessary, the quid pro quo sort of sidestepping of the shadal. We talked a little bit about the Hillel's story in white for two reasons why Ben Adam Lechavero is somehow more encompassing, or manifesting Hashem, and finally the difference between love and respect. And God willing, this closes a little bit, and this is the beginning of the discussion about love and humanity. Looking forward to next time. Thank you so much.